Hi, I'm Graeme Hush and you're listening to my podcast called Better Now, where I tell some of the stories behind my latest album of the same name. If you enjoy this episode, search and subscribe to the Graeme Hush Better Now podcast and download or stream it wherever you like to get your podcasts. To purchase the album, go to music.graemehush.com.au. Thanks to Mark Matthews from ABC Radio Illawarra for hosting this podcast.
Hi, my name's Mark Matthews, and it is a super privilege to be in the hub. This is with the band, Graeme Hush, in your hub, Graeme, in Corrimal. No? Your home ground. Got the home ground advantage here.
Okay.
And this is the start podcast of the Better Now series. So it's just really great to be with you and in the place where you live in, work in, reach out to your local community. It's no secret that Graeme and I have got a couple of decades behind us together.
That was nicely put.
Yes.
A couple of decades.
Because at our age, we forget how to count. So we just call it a couple of decades. Yeah. We're only really touching on half of the album tonight, in this podcast tonight. So the series that this will, I guess, give life to will give some more stories about what else has emerged from this album. So, yeah.
And a bunch of other things that I've been thinking about and reflecting on for years. And I guess the podcast idea sort of also evolved. But with relation to the music, it sort of made sense, particularly in this season that we're currently in. It made sense that some people, they access music and then they want to know the story.
Sure.
They want to know where that comes from.
Yes.
Some people engage a story and want to hear the music that goes with that story. And it's like a soundtrack to the story. Sure. And so I figured that to start a podcast or to launch a podcast series might be a way to do that. So I'm so thankful that, Mark, you came and
my pleasure.
Gave us this opportunity.
Who knows where this may go?
Ah, well.
And what the end will be, if there will be an end. Could be eternal. So Better Now. Tell us, the title. What's this? What was the origins of that?
It's one of those things, isn't it? When you're doing something creative like an album, you have about a dozen working titles. It never quite sits, but you sort of go, it might be this and it could be that, or you're always looking for a lyric rather than a song title because it's less obvious and cool and all that sort of stuff. It bounced off a couple of the other songs that were previously written, and we'll talk about that later. But Robert Sackett and I started playing this riff, a bit of a groove. We used to rehearse on Thursday nights and just hang out together there. And the groove sort of stuck with me. It sat inside. It was. It felt like it could be a big song, but I wasn't quite sure about that. So after a while, I went out to Waniora Point there at Bulli.
Yeah.
And it was a day where there was a bit of a storm rolling in across the ocean. And I was thinking about the riff, the feel of it, looking at these majestic things going on in front of me, and a lyric came. And I started to think about the storm of life. I started to think about the context of the waves coming in and going out, and match that up with the sort of a very summary story of the journey of life, and it ended up with the final line of the lyric being, "It seems much better now."
Had to make it on my own. No one stayed with me.
And it sort of made sense, and it sort of stuck. Yeah.
It's got a lot of energy. It's a big song, yeah. And so did it kind of grow that way as well? Because it looks like the title emerged. The title came as the song kind of emerged, didn't it?
Yeah, it did. It did, as is often true. But I guess I liked it as because I'm a bit of an analyzer. I don't overanalyze, surely.
That hasn't been
but
said before.
I do reflect on stuff a bit, deeply.
Yeah.
And so I first of all had that thought about the obvious connotation of the album being better than, say, a previous one, or better work than a previous situation, or I was better now than I used to be.
Sure.
But neither of those were true. It's about the circumstances of a transitioning life.
Yeah.
Challenging me to be something better. So I felt like it had some integrity, okay, it's always getting better. There's always an opportunity to grow. There's always lessons to be learned. And so I felt like that was something we could go with. That was something we could build on.
Yes.
People would be able to access it, yeah.
And of course, through your salvation journey, you're better now.
Well, that's always true.
Because of what's happened in your heart.
Yeah, that's true.
So let's have a listen to Better Now, and we'll come back and chat again.
Then a light sharp and strong broke through like a song, as big as the sky and vast as the sea. Said, come take my hand and rest in me. Then a light sharp and strong broke through like a song, as big as the sky and vast as the sea. Said, come take my hand and rest in me. All the things I want to be, dreams I thought were lost, they were given back to me. Someone paid the cost. And then the waves were calm and still. I saw my future clear. The spirit of life has rescued me from the lure of death in me. Much better now.
Yeah, Better Now. I love the ending. How it just kind of hangs there, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, it's sort of like it isn't finished. Yeah, there's still more. That's how it felt anyway. Yeah.
Rainbows after rain. let's just recap the last 3 years, all right? Because I love this part of your story. The Backwards Walk fundraiser, which was fabulous, and those of you that were part of that enjoyed watching Graeme walking backwards for 6 hours and playing the guitar and singing. I don't feel many people can do that.
As I mentioned on Saturday morning, not for the 6 hours.
Not for the 6 hours, admittedly. But you did it for the whole time I was there.
The 20 minutes or so, yeah.
And that was very convincing. No, and then, of course, so that's 3 years ago. Wow.
Yeah. In actual fact, the 24-hour table tennis marathon was the previous 12 months with Josh Rolls.
True. Yes.
Yeah.
So 4 years ago. And then last year, the 24-hour drumathon. How are you doing with that? You physically okay?
Yeah. I played yesterday. I think I'm okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
But do you still love drumming? That's the important thing. After the 24
Here's the
hours.
good news. After the drumathon, we did the album, and I drummed the album. So, yeah.
It was just like a warm-up.
So yes, maybe it was.
Oh, dear. So, yeah, a lot of people who know you understand your passion and, you know, the passion that both you and Karen have for local charities and local kids that have, and people you're connected with. Yeah. And so tell us the background to Rainbows After Rain.
Yeah, Rainbows is probably my favourite song that I've written ever.
Yeah. Wow.
And it's an interesting story because it ended up being what it is simply because of the kick in the pants that engaging with someone like Chloe Saxby brings.
Sure.
I started writing the riff in 2010.
Yeah.
So it's actually the oldest song on the album, apart from the couple of remixes of songs that we did. And it stuck around as a riff in my head for a very, very, very long time. I'd come back to it and go, oh, yeah. And then it'd go away, and it'd come back to it, go away.
Where is it going to be used?
Yeah, exactly right. When it dawned on me, literally in a moment, that it could be the music which is associated with what I was desiring to do in writing a song for Chloe, it became a challenge in my head because it's such a difficult thing to find a way to address the sort of subject matter we're talking about really clearly and positively, yet sensitively. It's challenging to balance how to strike at that, you know, and it was my main reason for producing a new album all up. It was a sort of what helped me get back into recording. It had been a while, and the ever elusive mountain that it is to get back on a horse when we hadn't recorded anything new, like fresh, like a studio album for 19 years. Yes. And so Rainbows After Rain was that first riff that sort of I was able to draw from. Now Rob, as I mentioned before, Rob Sackett and his family are invested in this little girl's journey. So when I aired the two key riffs in the song, he and I spent about 18 months playing with it. Literally 18 months playing with it, adjusting it, nuancing, basically approaching it phonetically. That means deliberately refusing to add a lyric until it added something to the song emotionally already, you know, because you generate a melody, and so often words can wreck that. You, as a songwriter, you would understand that.
Yeah.
And so I didn't want that to happen. And I'd only ever done the phonetic writing of a song once before, and that was the song Breathe on my Soul Signature album, which spent about 6 months without words until the whole idea from Reconciliation Australia and Indigenous well-being came to me, and it happened for a very similar reason. But the African sound design that now appears on Rainbows was a stroke of fresh genius. And it came from Wayne Gardner, our mate, who grew up with me in Bellambi, who heard Karen and I trying to explain where we were hoping this thing would go. And he came back with this idea that we'd sort of toyed with to some level with Karen's heritage, musically and otherwise. But when he brought it back, it was like, that's it. And when Rob heard it, it was a bit scary at first. It was like, oh, is that taking us in a whole new direction?
Yes.
But as he listened to it, the same thing happened for him. It was like, oh, actually,
Wow.
that could work. And then there's that recorder.
Sure. Yeah.
That recorder.
Well, this is why the song speaks to your heart. Like you really feel it's speaking to your heart deeply. And can I say, from the recorder point of view, which just and I've said this publicly.
Oh, and
before.
this isn't it. This is Judy's.
No.
Thank you, the tenor recorder. Wasn't the one.
No, that's the recorder on steroids. Yeah. No, the recorder that Graeme recorded. One of the first things when I met Graeme, if it's okay for us to go back to when, just 40 years ago, was when
Say that quicker.
Yeah, say that faster. When we started, when Bob Sackett, Peter Sharp, Graeme and myself started Cornerstone, out came the recorder. And I had never heard anyone play the recorder like you, Graeme Hush. And you can...
That was the plastic one, wasn't it?
That's the plastic one. Who can bend notes on a recorder? You can.
Oh,
Wow. A bit of portamento, a little bit of glisser. I'd have loved it. And it just... And then you play the recorder like you sing. You know, like you're unintimidated. And that's what I love about how you deliver a song. You know? Indomitable. Because not of your own confidence, but because of the confidence you have in faith in Christ. It's clear. And you play the recorder just like that too. So, I if you've never heard Graeme play a recorder, you've got to hear Graeme play his recorder.
If I was going to be
track.
pragmatic about it, I would say people kept poking fun at the recorder all those years I was playing it.
Absolutely.
And one day I woke up and I went, no, I'm going to make this the instrument.
Yeah. It was
That's
great.
sort of the history of it.
I know.
Yeah,
and
thank
people would watch us play, and when you did a recorder solo, they'd be going, recorders can do that? Is this lip synced or what? Great. And so let's have a listen to Rainbows After Rain, and you'll hear some Graeme Hush recording.
The line. So fresh-eyed with hope, can I end this fight? Go and look out the open window, see how the fresh green grass grows, not know from where the wind blows. We can't control our spaces, or how amazing grace is. We can believe in this love that's always enough, this love that's always enough. The great I am, love is the only source, and love's the plan. Love bears the hurt and pain, love is belief in rainbows after rain. Love is belief in rainbows after rain. Love is belief in rainbows after rain.
Cool. Wow. Love that song, Graeme. And you can tell, actually I can tell, from a musician's point of view, the time it took for it to emerge, 10 years.
Yeah.
And you feel that energy, you feel that passion. Yeah, you feel that
and it had to be the
empathy.
right thing to attach that passion to.
Yeah.
And Chloe was the ideal muse.
Sure. Yeah. And of course, people that know you know that you support Chloe Saxby's family, but there's more to it than that too, with your fundraising.
Yeah, that's right. So we started a thing that's a project that we call Hope for Kids, and Hope for us stands for Heaven on Planet Earth. And so we've got a relationship with 2 other kids. I mean, we could get overwhelmed. There's a lot of needs out there,
Sure.
right?
Yes.
And our people at Coralma Community Church were just keen to be a part of what we were doing together with the fundraisers and what have you. And it just dawned on us that we could be drowned in it, or we could find people that we have relationship with.
Sure.
And we did. And we did just that. So Chloe Saxby, her sister Mads, Nairi and Grant, her parents, terrific connection to Rob's family. But Bo McClinton suffers from a thing called Ohtahara syndrome, which is like 30 or 40 decent epileptic fits a day, and it's just an awful thing. Very difficult for the family. His mum Erin, dad Jezza, and brother Braden. And so these are all rare childhood diseases. So Bo was another one we added to that. And the other one is Michael, who is part of a family that Karen has a lot of history with. Michael's about 7 now, but he suffered from knee-high or neuroendocrine hyperplasia of infancy, which wasn't even discovered as a rare childhood disease until about 2005. So it impacts his lungs, and recently he was able to get off the oxygen tank and stuff like that. And so we whacked Michael and Bo and Chloe together, and we raise, our fundraising is for all 3 of them.
Yeah, it's lovely. I love the logo. I really love this logo, Hope. And when you look at it first, you just think it's an O, well, not a standard O, but it's got Australia in the middle of the O. It's just gorgeous. I love it. Hope for planet Earth for kids. Just fabulous. Oh, there's you.
I appeared again.
Half of you.
It's scary.
Is this on a local beach? Yeah. It just feels like it's a local
I don't know.
beach.
I have to ask our graphic designer, Rachel, about that.
That's sand, Graeme. I just know that's sand.
Yeah, it looks like sand.
Local sand. Now, people that know you would know you're a fun guy. And I don't mean the type that grows in the garden.
Not a mushroom?
Not a mushroom.
Okay, good.
Okay. Good. A fun guy. And on stage you're fun. Even if you don't think you're being funny, you have a great laugh that's contagious, Graeme. I don't know if you know that, do you? It's a contagious laugh. You just walk on stage and laugh in a microphone and the front row are laughing with you. It's fabulous.
Or laughing at me.
I don't feel they are. Because I've been in the front row. And so, but it's not easy to write a fun song. And I think if you go out intentionally to write a fun song, it ends up not fun. And a lot of your lyrics, I think it would be safe to say, it's not that they're serious, but they talk about life, which can be serious. And so a lot of it is, it is hard-hitting, it's emotive, and it's speaking to the psyche, the soul, But Take My Hand, it's a fun song. Did it start that way?
No. No, it didn't. It didn't start with a country feel either, can I just say?
That's what's funny about it. No?
It's the only song, it's the only other song that I've written that had a somewhat intentional country feel. Send Me from the first album, Where Is the Love, was the only other one. But I fixed that country feel by asking my guitarist to play a Pink Floyd riff.
Of course.
A Pink Floyd riff in the middle of it.
Hence eradicating the country feel.
Pretty much. It's certainly not where this song started. Karen and I are great John Mayer fans.
Uh-huh. Yep.
And even though his music does tend to float towards country on occasions, it's mostly solid rock, acoustic rock, folk rock, tells a story, and very big fans of that. Yeah, the sort of music that gets easily played in the basement of a smoky room or whatever.
Sure.
It's got that feel. And so this riff started there. But as I mentioned previously, everybody needs a Robert Sackett in their life.
Yep.
Robert gave me about 18 months to 2 years to rehearse new song ideas. He basically, at the time this began, he was processing for himself a fairly tragic season of personal family issues. But every now and then on a Thursday night when we were rehearsing these songs to sort of basically give them shape, any shape at all, he'd turn up on a Thursday night sometimes with something written on jotted down on a bit of paper or some sort of lyric that he'd been playing with for 30 years. But particularly this particular Thursday night, he had a partial lyric where he'd revisited something and it had never become a song. Very screwed up bit of paper. I fiddled with it, reshaped it, did some scanning of it, and to keep the essence, I guess, of Rob's therapeutic reflection, as it seemed to be, and came up with "Take My Hand." It became like a picture of the human struggle to stay connected to the most secure hands of all, right? And so we sort of let the John Mayer feel that we'd been mucking around with sort of evolve as we kept playing it in this acoustic rock space. But it gave me a good framework to build this word picture that was emerging. And after rehearsing it a lot and playing it live a few times, in fact, sometimes playing my songs raw is the way I get a sense from an audience about where something's going, and it helps my arrangement brain kick in. But in my mind, I started hearing a mate of mine in Canberra called Dean Burton, who ended up playing on our album, a great mate. I could hear him playing his sliding resonator guitar, even maybe a bit of mandolin across the river or something, you know. And about the same time, interestingly enough, mid last year, I reconnected with an old Wollongong mate that many will know, Peter Shirley. Peter's a great performer, a terrific violinist, and an amazing worship leader and performer, a minister in his own right. So I caught up with him performing locally and fiddling deftly at 100 miles an hour as he does. Miraculously, I reckon. Wow. And my dream for the song was born, basically. I laid some drum stems, a guide guitar and vocal, and Rob added some bass and some classy 12-string. Karen's gifts and skills took over, and that simple offering went to Dean and Peter, and they made the dream a reality. You know, Peter Sharp on bass.
Cool.
The lead cowbell, though, was inevitable.
Well, let's have a listen to the lead cowbell. Take my hand.
Fight. Oh, how dark the night. Don't you hesitate to call out my name. You know the one way out is a path found through the flame. Or you can take my hand if you want, it's less insane. You never have to hide 'cause I carried all your shame. To give you this one way. Forgiving this one way. Receiving this one way. Believing this one way.
So take my hand. Would you take my hand? Oh, we can't.
Can't.
Yeah, no,
Sorry.
sorry.
Back.
But we can share a sup.
We can. We
a
can
sip.
sup. Sip. Sup.
Let's sup as we sip.
Cheers.
That reminds me of that beautiful scripture in Revelation. Christ supping with us. Isn't that a lovely picture?
It's a nice picture. The feast.
Yeah. Now, okay, so let's see. Songwriter, lyricist, you're a musician, whether you like it or not. You actually are.
I drool out of both sides of my mouth.
Drummer, plays drums and recorder, and at the same time, I have seen that. You're an author, you're a minister, you're a public speaker, and so this album, I guess, and this next song is a little different to your classic gospel song, because, and then the whole album too. There's worship lyrics that come through, yeah, and it kind of says to me there's a personal testimony going on behind the scene. Yeah, speak to that for us.
Sure. Look, I feel like it comes out of a simple philosophy for me. Songwriting, album production has two prongs in my space. Neither of them have anything to do with the genre or style of music, by the way. The first prong is that the song, and as such any album, needs to be truthful about who I am.
Yeah.
Needs to speak to that. And secondly, it must be about my heart. It must expose something that I'm feeling, that is real in terms of my heart life. My songs need to be transparent, I guess vulnerable. So those who make the bold decision, in my estimation, to have a listen will feel encouraged by someone else's truth, you know,
Sure.
Enough to examine their own truth. And that's where I come from. The lyrics and the use of melody are one of the great challenges of any missionary's life. Working out with God how to use the tools you've been given, the things at your fingertips. I mean, it's like I'm talking to the choir, right?
Yeah.
But
Or the piano player.
but we're working with God how to use those tools all the time, right? Because the tools are so important for opening doors.
Yes.
The greatest story ever told needs an accessible language,
Sure.
which Jesus taught us, right? With his parables. Culturally sensitive, analogies from shared experiences in everyday life. My brother Ian and I didn't come from money, you know, but we were blessed to have parents that could keep time and hold a tune.
Too important.
As was true for many from that generation, the only reason Dad didn't reach his full potential, creative potential that is, was simply because of the circumstances and his lack of opportunity, right?
Yeah.
Mum had a few more opportunities because of her situation. At one stage, she was a young medal-winning tap dancer, a singer like in the Shirley Temple style. So at a very early age, I discovered that I could use singing as a tool that opened up opportunities for leadership and development. And once I discovered I could have a relationship with Jesus, a bunch of things came together. It saw singing become a tool that God wanted to bless and utilise in various presentation scenarios. It helps build an audience, and not necessarily an audience that you normally have access to. Jesus was the master storyteller. And so lyrics express my feelings, my emotions, the lessons of my life experiences, musical stories, poems that have given me access to people that I wouldn't normally have keys to. So, yeah, it's a really important thing in my albums to not be caught by contriving the story or trying to develop it to some level which is overthought, I guess. Yeah, I don't know.
You've given us a glimpse into your gene pool, just there, and how you approach songwriting, and not prescriptive. It's got to come from. It really comes from a spiritual and an emotive, and yet a logical component. Doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
All of those. All of those.
And I think that's possibly why it took 19 years to get to this point again. During that couple of decades, there were moments and occasional songs, but like I mentioned before, the whole engagement with Chloe and the fundraising thing gave it a real kickstart. But it came out of that relational stuff, you know, and that's really important.
Well, let's have a listen to No Love Like Yours.
Empowering me. This is not just a love worth dying for. It's the only true love worth living for.
So yeah, just listening to No Love Like Yours afresh just now. There's scriptural. There's some scripture in there. You know, there's some real Bible themes coming through that. Yeah, would that be a part of where that's emerged from?
Yeah, I think it's a case in point. I want to make a strong personal statement, but I don't believe in compartmentalising.
Yeah.
I mean, that sounds like a really long word to use, but it's true.
It is a long word.
My faith and life are in Christ,
Yes.
and it's not in bits. I don't do this, and then I'll do this, and then, I'll go to
No,
school.
they're not separate rooms.
Yeah, no. I'm an artist, and my art displays who I am.
Sure.
And that's really important for me. It's no different to, say, Michael Bublé writing love songs, or David Grohl writing anthems of anguish and activism. That's who they are.
Yeah.
Right?
Sure.
And no one questions that.
Yeah.
Right? So I am who God says I am, and my songs paint that picture. And for me, it's a picture of real life, the real life of a flawed human follower of Jesus, if you like.
Yeah. Which is why some of your lyrics are really quite spiritual. Others are more reflective. Others you might even go, wow, doesn't seem to have a spiritual context. It doesn't matter. It's a part of who you are and those aspects of your life.
Well, life is spiritual, isn't it? And
sure is.
For me, No Love Like Yours in particular, it could be taken as a love song. People could use it as a genuine love song between them, or to describe some journey of their life together. But it's also a reflection of the power or the empowering presence of God through love in life. And so it's intense in both ways, I guess. Yeah.
A lot of folk singers, a lot of rock folk singers, often find themselves writing about their journey through life, because a ballad is that, isn't it? A ballad tells
that's
a
exactly
story.
what it is. Yeah.
And so. And often, I think most singers eventually write a song about where they grew up. Yeah.
Nah.
And so, but there's something a little different about my hometown. It's clearly, coming home. It's reflecting on all the puppy dogs down the street, and the natural things that happen in life, and the neighbour's dog that barks at that wrong time, and all the things that happen as you grew up.
Do we need to wait for Mal just to stop barking?
Is that dog's name Mal?
Yeah.
Wow. It's like a. Isn't that interesting? To name a dog after a human.
It's like Bill or
Mal.
Bill the cat.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mal. And when he's in trouble, do they say Malcolm?
So you're talking about the neighbourhood?
Yeah, the neighbourhood. It's perfect. I think Mal picked up on where we're going. He's already there.
He's there, as dogs are.
He's in home. He's in the zone already. I'm in the zone. It's certainly got a coming home feel to it, hasn't it? Yeah. But it's got something deeper going on there too. So tell us about my hometown.
It's a song with an interesting history. This is one song that has been recorded before. In fact, on two previous albums. The last full album that I did in 2001, studio album of original material, that was the first time. The second time was on a live set of tracks that we sort of put together as a thing called Live in the Heartland. And interestingly enough, it wasn't about Bellambi initially, the original version. It was in the final moments before I left Hobart in Tasmania. I'd had a season there in ministry, a season I remember fondly in so many ways. But the season had become a bit difficult, and I was leaving this particular day, and it held a lot of special memories to me. And so there was this place I used to go to pray. It's called Rosny Lookout, and it's just east of the famous Tasman Ridge, and it looks right over the city, and with Mount Wellington, almost looks like it has its arms open behind it.
Yes.
It's a beautiful
Protecting.
picture. Yeah, it's great. So cradling, everything in front of it. So I went there often, and so on this morning I was driving up to Devonport on the north coast to catch the ferry to Melbourne, and I stopped once more there. And what I did was I pulled out my pad, as I often did, to journal, and I penned a prayer for my Hobart town, which was recorded as a very simple version. It was a huge privilege for me to do a launch concert outdoors for the Soul Signature album that it was on, down between the houses there and the surf club at Bellambi. I did a local launch.
Yes.
And before the gig started, I thought that it lent itself, that my Hobart town lent itself to this actual setting and my history, my growing up. And so while setting up for the gig, I rewrote the lyrics as a prayer for Bellambi.
Wow.
I was sitting there and we performed it. I had the bit of foolscap paper hanging off the mic stand.
Could you read what you just written?
Yeah, most of it. The new lyric was scrawled, you know.
Yeah. Wow. It's about timing, isn't it?
Yeah, it is about timing. It was all about timing. It was so right to do. And the lyrics just flow. As I looked at the vista, as I looked at the setting, I realised, and then mixed that a bit with things I remembered from my childhood.
Yeah.
It sort of made a lot of sense.
Wow.
I did it live with my mate Mon, who played piano, and I just played guitar a few years later after recording it the first time. And it got an incredible reaction. It was the first time I recorded the Bellambi version. After my amazing guitarist mate Wayne Gardner agreed to collaborate with us on this album, I saw an opportunity that I previously thought I would never have. And you've got to sort of see that in this context. Wayne used to come to the Wollongong Church that I was a part of, or was one of the ministers of. I was working with one of the fathers of my faith, Barry McMurtry. And Wayne would play his acoustic guitar when we served communion on occasion. Not that too many people ever realise, but Wayne often played Led Zeppelin classics like The Rain Song or Over the Hills and Far Away, because they were epic in length and wonderfully constructed pieces of guitar virtuoso. And so, because Wayne and I grew up together in Bellambi, and he was one of the friends I often cited in the lyric of songs. So one night in mid last year, I was having a late coffee catch up with him in Maryland, where he was living at the time in Sydney, and he shared his latest ideas about the songs he was putting together for us. And I played him My Hometown for the first time and asked if he could, and I quote, "Rain song it for me." When he did it, and he did exactly that, when he wasn't sure what he sent Karen and I would work, but I added my simple acoustic guitar to it, tried to keep it as raw as possible, bit of vocal, and I was in heaven.
Wow.
The song celebrates a misunderstood town that has an amazing history, and this final version remains my prayer for my hometown. What he did was brought it to life for me again, and hopefully it'll bring it to life for many others.
Yeah, let's have a listen to My Hometown.
First to be seen, endeavor was hoping to find a way in. Beyond this unseen world, chain and freedom, spiritual air is choked on appearances. To the loss of precious souls, the warmth and love of single hearts needing release, yet somehow still fighting. Keep loving and helping out, keep giving yourselves away. upside down. Don't undermine your own self-esteem. Dream worthy dreams.
Wow. I tear up when I think about my childhood, you know, and just the places we grew up in. And here we are in the hub in Augusta Street, a couple of Ks from where you grew up. Less than half a K from where I grew up in Taradki.
And you know, your father still tells the story, doesn't he?
Yes.
Because he's the
Every
TV guy.
He's the TV
and he
guy.
used to do our TV back in Fix It. And
Yep,
he
that's
always,
right.
what's the story he tells?
And so he'd have the back of the TV, and he'd be working on your TV, and your mum's in the kitchen, and he's got his toolbox open, right? All these tools, 100,000 tools. Dad's kind of working. He'd go to grab another tool, and there's Graeme Hush, not just kind of around the toolbox, but in the toolbox, like in it. And so he'd pick you up in your nappy, just put you back on the floor. There's Mummy over there.
People who know me now wouldn't have any idea that I could ever have been that small.
I know. Teeny tiny. He's just a teeny tiny little guy. Off you go. And so you crawl after you. And he's back in the TV fixing it. And there you are again, in the toolbox. Every time.
There's so much richness in the history. I mean, when you start to think about story and the journey, it sort of comes to life.
It does, No, it does. Really privileged to be in this podcast with you. And as I was, when you invited me to play keys on Your Kingdom Come. Wow, when Karen sent me the stems, it was really, I had to listen to it several times to immerse myself in its majesty. It's got a real majestic feel to it. And it inspired me to improvise some of those runs. And let's be really frank and honest about it. There was some Keith Green that affected both of us.
Yeah, there's some Keith. Yes.
Keith impacted. Is that the right word? Yeah, Keith confronted our lives.
Yes, it just more than
in our late teens, as he confronted the entire planet. And so I think it's okay for us to say there's a bit of Keith in that feel, isn't it? But this then segues back to your soul signature album too. We're talking nearly 2 decades. And how Come Lord Jesus, which was in that album, comes back out of Your Kingdom Come. This is the worship link. And I'm really sensing now, as I listen to the album in context, that it needed growth. Did it need growth for those 2 decades? Or it had more to go?
Yeah, it really did. As a writer, you would know this to be true. You're never quite satisfied.
No.
Right. You hear something back and it captures your emotion and heart, but it doesn't always do. Like, 5 years will pass and you're listening and you're going, there's more.
Yeah.
There's more in there.
And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Deliver us from evil. For yours is the kingdom, the power and the glory. The power and the glory, Lord, forever.
Because musically you've grown, emotionally you've grown.
I think so.
Spiritually.
I hope so. I hope that's
Yeah.
true.
Yeah.
I felt that in this project, absolutely. Partly, I think, just simply by the variety of genre, like the variety of ideas in it. It possibly isn't my norm. It's interesting because most people who've heard me sing in life over the years, if I sing a Keith Green song, or if I sing a worship tune, or if I'm leading something, I actually sing in another octave. And people get used to that.
Yes.
And I hear this come back to me occasionally. When they hear the albums that I've produced since the late 80s, the first album was 89, because they're my original songs and they come out of my journey, my story, they often aren't in the same register. Sure. And so my voice won't necessarily sound the same as they're used to hearing. It was really interesting that my best mate on the planet, Gordon Barr, who many will know, his first comment about when he was listening to the original pilot tracks from this album was that he liked my voice, the way it was coming out in this production, and I believe that's a lot to do with the way Karen produces. But just commenting on what you were saying before, he thought there was a growth, a maturity, that it was different, and he has a fairly strong view because I did a lot of Keith stuff with Gordon over the years, and we sang at this upper octave most of the time.
The Keith register. Yeah,
the Keith register. That's right. So it is a different thing. So sometimes people get, I don't know if shocked's the right word, but they get thrown a little bit by what they're hearing because it's not what they're expecting. This album's I felt there was an opportunity to find a moment in the set,
sure,
where we could combine something fresh, Your Kingdom Come, that still has that classic hook and connection, to something that's been around for a while and still needed some opportunity to grow. Again, with Karen working with me on this album for the first time, made all the difference in the world when she played back her ideas, her fresh ideas, being someone who's listening to Come Lord Jesus after the fact, after the initial journey of it. And that was pretty special, and it made it obvious that we could develop about 12 minutes or so where people could just, in their cars or whatever, just spend some time in the throne room of God, just worshipping, and with some strong scriptural content and all that sort of stuff.
Majesty on mountains, we can see your faithfulness on high. Your kingdom come, your will be done. This hour.
The formation of the song, as you asked, is a little interesting in the sense that it initially came out of some time that my band in those years we were doing a lot of prisons. We're playing a lot of prisons. We're playing high schools, so those sorts of audiences, and particularly a couple of prison gigs, 2 different bands, where I found I needed to write something to debrief what I just experienced. Have you ever done that?
Yes.
Yeah. Can you think of songs that you've done that with?
Yeah.
It's like I just need to
reflect
on this deeper
and debrief yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And Come Lord Jesus was very much that at a particular time of the journey, and coming out of a couple of prison gigs, based on Luke 4, or Jesus at the synagogue in Nazareth, reading from Isaiah about himself. Of course, he says classically at the end of that moment, today this scripture has been fulfilled in me, in your hearing, he says.
Yes.
Sweet freedom for the captive, swift healing for the broken, sweet mercy for the hurting and the weak, sweet comfort for the mourning, swift justice for the prisoner, sweet joy and gladness for the poor and meek.
And so I was desperate to capture live that live feeling I had by singing it to people and having people sing it with me.
Sure. Yes.
Gordon and I went to Mexico about that time, and in the process of the production of the album, and in 2001, and we did it over there. Gordon said, "Oh, you've got to sing 'Come Lord Jesus' to these Mexican people," right? I said, "But I've got to sing in English, right? And not just English, Graeme English." You know. And he said, "No, just do it." Yeah. And miraculously, the people who were interpreting for us while we were there in ministry picked it up and ran with it and created the Spanish version of it in the language, and it sort of took off. It's really interesting. It's become more and more useful, and now with this new production, Life, the current use of it has a lyric that I'm happier with. I changed it slightly.
Sure. Yeah.
Whereas in the first version, I had like screaming guitars at the end of it. This time we used violin and cello, it still ended up amazingly because of the way Karen mixed it, and it still ended up being one of the biggest songs on the album. It has that anthemicness about it. It sounds really, really big. Yeah, just find another word for it. And Peter Sharp, who from our
Peter the Rock
Cornerstone
Sharp
days, Peter and Rob and you, me, Peter played bass on this one, and one take, Peter, and it's sublime. It's one of the most hauntingly beautiful bass lines I think I've ever heard in this really simple chordal structure. And it's a special moment for me. It sets up a whole bunch of things for me on the album, and it was great to be able to utilise it again in this fresh way.
Beautiful. Yeah, it's beautiful. Better Now is the album, and my understanding is for a limited time, 50% of the sales will be heading towards your 3 chosen charities.
Yeah, normally 20% all the time of total sales goes to our Hope for Kids project, but from August 15, which was going to be the original day of the launch, which we've pushed back to September. So from the 15th of August to about the 15th of September, about a month, we're going to make it 50%. So half of the total sales will go, and that will be terrific. So it's both available as a limited edition CD that you're holding and a digital download. Both of them are the same.
Beautiful. Well, we've been sitting here physically distanced, but never emotionally or spiritually distanced. I've loved chatting with you, Graeme. And
thanks for doing this, mate.
No, my pleasure.
Appreciate it.
I'm looking forward to hearing the rest of the podcast series. It's going to be awesome. This podcast was recorded at The Hub, Augusta Street, Corrimal, with thanks to Caleb Angeli and Karen Hush.